The infinite library, a place of entertainment and infinite knowledge. Presence, the shelter of the wind.
Chapter 1. Return to the Vault.
The bus snaked along the road as if doubting its fate. Meanwhile, Luz, a passenger, watched through the window the forests of fog that embraced the mountains of Hidalgo. It was August, but the air had that cold that is not measured in degrees, but in memories. Is there a long way to go? Tomás, his younger brother, asked, arranging his backpack between his legs. About 15 minutes. Are you okay? Yes, although I feel that the wind is following us. Luz smiled. Thomas always said strange things, but since he was a child, his words had a kind of poetic truth. She had learned to listen to him with her heart, not with logic. They returned to the village where they had spent the first years of their childhood. Their grandmother, the only stable figure in their lives, had passed away 3 months earlier. The shelter she had managed, a mixture of veterinary clinic and animal shelter, it was now empty. Or so they thought. Finally, the bus stopped in front of a rusty fence. The driver didn't even look back. Luz lowered first, feeling the air change temperature as she crossed the threshold. Thomas descended carefully, leaning on his wooden staff carved with bird figures. Do you remember this? Luz asked. I remember the trees. But they weren't so silent. The shelter stood among the pines like a house that had forgotten how to be home. The windows were boarded, but some let in the light as if they wanted to look out. The front door had claw marks. Non-human. Not recent. Luz turned the key that her grandmother had left in a tea box. The sound of the bolt was like a long sigh. As they entered, the smell of old wood, damp earth, and something else, something like lavender and ash, enveloped them. Do you think there are still animals here? Tomás asked. I doubt it. But if there are, we will take care of them. The first room was full of empty cages, some with names written on yellowed paper. Tigrillo, Zainate, Colibri. Luz felt a chill. Not out of fear, but out of a sense that something was recognizing her. Did you hear that? Tomás said. What? A purr. And then they saw it. A grey, golden-eyed cat sitting on a wooden box. He was not moving. He didn't blink. He just looked at them as if he knew who they were. Hello, Michi. Luz said without knowing why she called him that. The cat jumped out of the box and walked towards them. Behind, as if responding to an invisible signal, appeared a mongrel dog, with white fur and floppy ears. He approached Tomás and licked his hand. Toto. Tomás whispered. How do you know their names? I don't know. They told me. Luz didn't ask any more. I had learned that some answers are not given in words. They explored the rest of the shelter. The kitchen had clean dishes, as if someone had washed them that morning. The attic was padlocked. The basement too. But the back garden was full of wildflowers, birds that shouldn't be there in that season, and a fountain that still worked. Do you see? Luz said. Of what? This place. It is not abandoned. He's waiting. The wind blew suddenly, lifting leaves, moving curtains, causing Michi to bristle and Toto to bark into the forest. What if the shelter is not only for animals? Tomás asked. What do you mean? What if it's also for memories that have nowhere to live? Luz looked at him. He did not answer. She just walked up to him, hugged him, and together they entered the main room. Michi and Toto followed. Outside, the wind was spinning as if drawing invisible circles on the earth. And in the attic, something moved.
Chapter 2. Whispers in the Wood.
The first night in the shelter was quieter than Luz expected. There were no noises of cars, no music from neighbors, not even crickets. Only the wind. which seemed to walk through the corridors as if inspecting every corner. Michi slept on the wooden box, the same one they had not been able to open. Toto settled next to Tomas, as if he knew that he needed special protection. Luz, on the other hand, could not sleep. He stared at the ceiling, where the beams creaked as if someone were walking on them. At 3 a.m, the wind changed direction. It wasn't a breeze. It was a blow. The curtains were raised, the papers flew, and Michi stood on end. Luz jumped up. Thomas. He whispered. His brother was still asleep, but he was muttering something in his sleep. Don't leave them out. Don't leave them out. Luz approached. He touched her forehead. It was cold. Who, Thomas? The children. Those that fly. The wind stopped. Toto got up, walked to the front door, and sat down. He did not bark. He just waited. Luz lit an oil lamp. The light was shaking as if it were afraid. She walked down the hallway to the archive room, where her grandmother kept records of the animals that had passed through the shelter. Most were dogs, cats, injured birds. But there was a separate section, marked with a label that read, "Do not release." He opened the first drawer. Inside there were cards with strange names: hummingbird, vulture, sparrowhawk, mockingbird. They were not animal names. They were children's names. Each card had a date, a physical description, and an endnote: incomplete transfer, memory retained. Luz felt the air become denser, as if the shelter didn't want me to read anymore. What did you do, grandmother? He whispered. He returned to the room. Thomas was still asleep, but now he had a slight smile. Michi was looking at her from the box. Toto had gone back to bed. Luz sat down on the ground between them and closed her eyes. Then he heard it. A voice. Non-human. Non-animal. A mixture of both. We are not ghosts. We are wind with a name. Luz opened her eyes. No one spoke, but the phrase kept echoing in his mind. At dawn, the shelter seemed like another place. Sunlight streamed in through the cracks, birds chirped in the garden, and Michi walked gracefully through the halls as if patrolling sacred territory. Thomas woke up with unusual energy. I had a dream, he said. He was in the woods, but it wasn't me. It was a bird. He was flying over the shelter. And downstairs, you took care of everyone. Luz hugged him. She didn't know what was going on, but something inside her told her not to be afraid. That the shelter was not a cursed place. It was an incomplete place. They went out into the garden. Dona Clara, the neighbor, was waiting by the gate. He was carrying a cage with an injured grackle. Good morning, Luz. The wind told me that you had already arrived. Luz was not surprised. He just smiled. What happened to you? He fell from the tree where he always sings. As if something had pushed him. Thomas approached. The grackle looked at him with bright eyes. He didn't scream. He did not tremble. He just let himself be touched. This one has a name too, said Thomas. It's called Cloud. Dona Clara nodded. Yes. That's what the children called it. Luz looked at her. What children? Dona Clara lowered her gaze. Those who lived here before it was a refuge. Those who left their names on birds. Those who are still looking for a place to perch. The wind blew. Not strong. Non-violent. Just like a long sigh. And Michi, from the window, meowed. Not because of hunger. Not for attention. But as if he were responding to a call that only he could hear.
Chapter 3. The Attic and the Eyes of the Wind.
The third day began with a strange synchronicity. Luz woke up before dawn, just as Michi jumped on the wooden box and meowed 3 times. Toto got up, walked to the attic door, and sat down. He did not bark. He didn't groan. He just waited. Is it time? Tomas asked, still half asleep. Time for what? To open what does not want to be opened. Luz approached the attic. The padlock was rusty, but not closed. As if someone had left it like that on purpose. He carefully removed it. The door creaked as it opened, revealing a wooden staircase leading up into the darkness. Are you coming with me? He asked Tomas. No. But Michi does. The cat climbed first, as if he knew the way. Luz followed, the oil lamp trembling in her hand. The attic was full of dust, but it didn't smell of abandonment. It smelled of old paper, of living wood, of something I'd been waiting for. In the center, there was a table with a metal box. On top, a notebook with a leather cover. Luz opened it. The first page read, Transfer Register. Hummingbird Project. Year 1974. The following pages were filled with names, dates, and symbols that I did not recognize. Some looked like drawings of birds. Others, wind maps. On the last page, a sentence written in red ink. The wind does not forget. Just wait for them to hear it. Michi sat down next to the metal box. Luz tried to open it, but it didn't have a lock. Just a wing-shaped groove. As he touched it, he felt a shiver. Not scary. Of recognition. What is this, Michi? The cat looked at her. And for an instant, Luz felt that she was not a cat. He was a witness. He came down from the attic with the notebook in hand. Tomas was waiting for her with a cup of tea that Dona Clara had brought that morning. Did you find anything? Yes. But I don't know how to explain it. Tomas leafed through the notebook. He stopped at a page with a drawing of a hummingbird surrounded by circles. I dreamed this last night, he said. The hummingbird was spinning in a spiral, and each turn was a memory. Luz looked at him. He no longer doubted his dreams. I knew that Tomas was a channel. Not by magic. By sensitivity. They went out into the garden. The birds sang with unusual intensity. Dona Clara was feeding a mockingbird that had lost a leg. Did you know that the children in the orphanage had names of birds? Luz asked. Yes. It was part of the ritual. Each child chose a bird that represented him. They said that the wind would recognize them when they left. Will you go where? Dona Clara looked at her tenderly. Where do memories that have no body go? The wind blew. Toto barked. Michi climbed onto the roof. Tomas began to paint. Not with brushes. With your hands. On a wall of the shelter, he traced figures of birds, children, trees, and a spiral that connected everything. Luz watched him. Each stroke seemed guided by something beyond him. What are you painting? He asked. A map. But not of places. Of memories. That night, the wind did not blow. He stood still. As if he were listening. Luz returned to the attic. This time, the metal box was open. Inside, there were feathers. Not common. They were impossible colors, lunar blue, ash red, shadow green. And below, a note. Every feather is a memory. Return them to the wind. Luz came down with her feathers. He placed them in the garden, on stones, among flowers, on branches. Michi and Toto followed her. Dona Clara watched from the gate. Tomas painted in silence. As he placed the last feather, the wind picked up. Non-violent. Not cold. Just present. And then, it was heard. A laugh. Slight. Childish. As if the shelter remembered what it was like to be home.
Chapter 4. The Night of Echoes.
The fourth night fell with a silence that was not an absence of sound, but containment. As if the wind were preparing to speak. Luz couldn't sleep. Michi had hidden under the bed. Toto was scratching at the garden gate, but he didn't want to go out. Tomas drew compulsively, as if his hands were guided by something that did not belong to him. "What are you painting now?" Luz asked. "I don't know, but every stroke makes me cold." On the wall, a new figure had appeared, a boy with hummingbird wings, his eyes closed, and a spiral sticking out of his chest. Around, words that Tomas did not remember writing. "We were not forgotten. We were shelved." Luz returned to the attic. This time, the lamp did not turn on. He used a candle. When he arrived, the metal box was empty. But on the ground, there were new feathers. Black. Long, cool to the touch. He picked them up. As he did so, he heard a whisper. Not a voice. An echo. "Light. Light. Light." He came down trembling. Dona Clara was waiting for her in the kitchen, with a cup of roux tea. "Did you hear anything?" he asked. "Yes. My name." "Then you're in." "Within what?" Dona Clara looked at her with a mixture of compassion and resignation. "From the archive. The refuge is not just a place. It is a container. Each animal here holds a human memory. They are not pets. They are witnesses." "Witnesses of what?" "What the Hummingbird Project tried to erase." Tomas entered. His eyes were red, but not because of crying. By intensity. "I dreamed of a white room. Children sitting. They put headphones on them. They were told to imagine that they were birds. That they would forget their names. That they would fly away." Dona Clara nodded. "That was real. I was a nurse. I was asked to take care of the children while they transitioned. I never understood what they wanted to achieve. I only know that afterwards, the children no longer spoke. They only sang." Luz felt the air become denser. The wind hit the window. Not like a breeze. As a warning. "And what happened to them?" "Some died. They became wind." That night, Luz went out into the garden. He placed the black feathers in a circle. Michi and Toto sat outside the perimeter. Thomas watched from the window. The wind picked up. The feathers turned. And then, it was heard. A voice. Non-human. Non-animal. Something in between. "We are not ghosts. We are hungry memories." Luz fell to her knees. Not out of fear. By recognition. Something inside her knew that she had been there before. Not in body. In echo. Tomas ran away. He knelt beside her. He took his hand. "You're remembering." "Remembering what?" "What they made you forget." Dona Clara appeared with a wooden box. Inside, there were photos. Children with wings drawn. Luz recognized one. It was her. As a child. With a blue feather in his hand. "Was I in the project?" "Yes. But you escaped. You were adopted before they completed the process. But the wind never let go of you." Luz cried. Not out of sadness. By decompression. As if something that had been tight inside of her had finally come loose. The wind turned. The feathers rose. And in the sky, for an instant, a luminous spiral was drawn. Tomas painted it the next day. Michi slept on the box again. Toto stopped scratching the door. And Luz understood that the shelter was not a place to heal. It was a place to remember.
Chapter 5. The Visitor and the Fracture.
The fifth day began with a knock on the door. Not a violent one. A bureaucratic one. "Refuge of the Wind?" asked the man with dark glasses and clipboard. "Yes," Luz replied cautiously. "I'm Inspector Rivas. I come to evaluate the conditions of the place. There is a request for closure due to irregularities." Dona Clara turned pale. Tomas clenched his fists. Luz felt the wind stop. Who requested the closure? Tomas asked. Confidential. But there are reports of unauthorized activity, rituals, wildlife handling, and improper use of facilities. Luz looked at him. Rituals. Manipulation. Who had spoken? The inspector toured the place. He took photos. He asked questions. He looked at Thomas's drawings with suspicion. He stopped in front of the mural of the hummingbird boy. What does this represent? Memory, replied Thomas. Memory of what? What you tried to erase. The inspector wrote something down. He did not answer. That night, the atmosphere became tense. Luz and Tomas did not speak. Michi hid. Toto did not eat. Did you talk to anyone? Luz asked. Are you insinuating that I asked for closure? No. But someone did. And you've been going out without saying where. And you've been in the attic without me? What are you hiding? The words hurt more than the silence. Dona Clara tried to mediate, but the damage was done. Tomas locked himself in his room. Luz went up to the attic. The metal box was closed again. This time, with a new padlock. She hadn't put it in. The wind blew. Strong. As if he wanted to scream. Luz came down. He found a note in the kitchen. It was Tomas's. I don't know if I can trust you. The inspector knew things that only you and I knew. If this is broken, let it be for truth, not for suspicion. Luz cried. Not because of the note. Because of the fracture. The shelter was no longer a sanctuary. It was a field of tension. That night, the wind turned violent. The birds did not sing. Michi disappeared. Toto barked non-stop. Dona Clara gathered Luz and Tomas in the garden. This is not just between you. The shelter is reacting. If you break, the file disintegrates. What file? Asked the inspector, who had returned unannounced. The one you created without knowing it. Every drawing, every feather, every animal. It is an entrance. And if you betray yourselves, memories are scattered. The inspector laughed. Memoirs. Animals as archives. This is a dangerous fantasy. Thomas got up. And what is more dangerous? To remember or pretend that it never happened. Luz looked at him. For the first time in days, he felt that there was still something between them. Not trust, but will. That night, they decided to do something radical. They went up to the attic together. They broke the lock. They opened the box. Inside, there was a new notebook. Blank. But when I touched it, the pages began to fill up by themselves. Names, dates, drawings, voices. It was the archive. Alive. Reactivated by their reconciliation. The inspector entered without permission. He saw the notebook. He tried to take it. But the wind pushed him. Literally. He fell to the ground. He got up trembling. What is this? It's what you wanted to bury. And what we decided to dig up. The inspector left. He did not return. Luz and Tomas looked at each other. They did not hug. They did not apologize. But they shared silence. And in that silence, the wind sang again.
Chapter 6. The Box and the Threshold.
The sixth day did not begin. It unfolded. As if time had no intention of moving forward, only of observing. Luz woke up before the sun. Tomas had not slept. Dona Clara prepared bougainvillea tea, but no one drank it. The notebook was still open in the attic. The pages moved by themselves, as if the wind were reading them. What if we shouldn't have opened it? Luz asked. What if it was the only thing that could save us? Tomas replied. The shelter creaked. Not due to deterioration. By memory. Dona Clara went up to the attic. He did not ask for permission. He touched the notebook. He closed his eyes. He muttered something that was neither prayer nor incantation. It was an ancient language. Of roots. Feathers. The box was not a container. It was threshold. He said. Tomas ran downstairs. In his hands, a new drawing. He hadn't done it. The notebook had generated it. It was Alma. But not alone. She was surrounded by blurred figures. Animals. People. Fragments. Who are they? Luz asked. The ones we don't remember. The ones that the file wants to recover. That afternoon, the shelter was filled with visitors. Non-humans. Birds that did not migrate. Insects that shouldn't be there. A fox that sat in front of the door. Michi returned. Toto stopped barking. They're responding to the file. Dona Clara said. And what do you want? Tomas asked. To be named. Luz took the notebook. He wrote a name. Sol. Then another. Rocio. Then another. Elias. I didn't know where they came from. But each name made the wind change direction. The inspector did not return. But his figure appeared in a drawing. Not as a threat. Like shadow. What if he is also part of the archive? Tomas asked. Then we must remember. Not because of what he did. Because of what it represents. Dona Clara placed the metal box in the center of the garden. Not as an altar. As a portal. Today is not a day of ritual. It's transit day. Luz and Tomas held hands. Not for reconciliation. Out of necessity. The box opened by itself. Inside, there were no objects. There was light. Not blinding. Revealed. What do we do? Luz asked. We go in. Tomas replied. They did not walk. They did not move. But they were inside. They saw memories that were not theirs. They saw mistakes. They saw silences. They saw possibilities. When they left, the notebook had a new sentence. The shelter does not guard. Transform. That night, no one spoke. Not out of fear. Out of respect. The wind did not sing. Heard.
Chapter 7. Breathing Altars.
The shelter woke up differently. Not because of the weather. Through the air. There was something suspended. As if time had stopped to listen. Dona Clara placed marigold flowers at the entrance. It wasn't November. But the calendar does not rule in the rituals of the soul. Today is the day of the dayless, he said. Luz and Tomas prepared the central space. Not as an altar. As an offering. Each object had a weight. A story. An absence. A white feather. Soul. An empty notebook. The denied memories. A clay figure. The inspector who never returned. A broken mirror. Light before the ritual. A stone with a spiral. Tomas and his persistent memory. Animals surrounded the altar. Not as spectators. As guardians. Michi lay down next to the pen. Toto barked toward the forest. The birds sang in tones they hadn't used before. What are we doing? Luz asked. We are remembering those we did not know how to remember, Tomas replied. Dona Clara lit a candle. Then another. Then another. Each flame seemed to open a door. Not all the dead are dead. Some live in memory. Others in oblivion. And others in the shelter. Luz posted a photo. Not of Alma. Of herself, as a child. With my eyes closed. As if he already knew. Tomas took out a drawing. It was Alma. But with full wings. Not broken. Not wounds. Complete. Are you idealizing her? Luz asked. I'm releasing her. The wind came in. Not like a breeze. As presence. The pages of the notebook began to fill up. Not with words. With symbols. Spiral. Poultry. Fragments. What does this mean? That the shelter also remembers. Even if we don't. Dona Clara placed bread of the dead. I don't eat food. As a sign. This bread does not nourish the body. Nurture the bond. Luz cried. Not out of sadness. By recognition. What if I'm not who I thought I was? Then you're closer to being who you can be. Thomas took the white pen. He placed it on the drawing. Alma is not just your sister. It's our crack. And so is our guide. The altar shone. Not because of the candles. For something else. The animals began to move in circles. As if they were dancing. As if they celebrated. What's going on? They are recognizing. They are honoring. They are healing. Luz closed her eyes. He saw Alma. Not as a girl. Like wind. As a memory. As a possibility. Do you forgive me? The figure smiled. He did not answer. It was not necessary. Tomas took the notebook. He wrote a sentence. Remembering is not reliving. It is reconfiguring. Dona Clara blew out the candles. Not by the end. By transition. The altar is not closed. It transforms. Luz and Tomas went out into the garden. The mural had changed. Now there were 3 figures. Light. Thomas. Soul. Not as ghosts. Like roots. The inspector appeared at the entrance. Not as a threat. As a witness. What is this? A refuge, Luz replied. Of what? Of what we did not know how to name. The inspector looked at the altar. He said nothing. Then he left. Dona Clara smiled. Not all reports are written in words.
Chapter 8. The Archive of Those Who Still Breathe.
The refuge was no longer only for Luz and Tomas. The news had spread. Not through networks. By wind. By birds. By dreams. People were arriving. Not as tourists. As search engines. Each one brought something. A photo, a letter, a stone, a song. They didn't know why they were coming. Only they had to. Dona Clara received them with tea of the flower of the dead. Not as a drink. As a welcome. You don't come here to forget. It comes to be remembered without fear, he said. Luz and Tomas had transformed the main hall into a living archive. There were no shelves. There were altars. Each visitor left something. And in return, he received a pen. Not as an object. As a symbol. What does the pen mean? A girl asked. That your memory now flies. Luz replied. Tomas painted each story. Not as a portrait. As an emotional map. The walls were filled with spirals, faces, fragments. A man left a box with letters that he never sent. A woman brought her mother's dress. A young man placed a tape recorder with his grandfather's voice. What if I don't want to remember? Someone asked. Then your silence will also be part of the file, Dona Clara said. The inspector returned. This time with her daughter. He didn't have papers. He had an empty notebook. Can I leave this? Of course. Here every void has the right to be filled. Luz began to write names. Not people. Of emotions. Of absences. Of intuitions. Tomas designed a collective mural. Each visitor painted a line. In the end, it looked like a river, or a spiral, or a wound that healed. One night, a woman arrived with an urn. He said nothing. He only placed it on the altar. Then he left. The urn opened by itself. Inside, there were ashes, but also a note. Don't forget me, but don't lock me up either. The wind blew strongly. The birds sang. Michi lay down next to the urn. Toto barked into the sky. Dona Clara organized a ceremony. Not as an event, as an act of memory. Today we honor those who were never named. To those who did not have an altar. To those who live in the echo. Each visitor lit a candle. Luz placed Alma's pen in the center. Thomas painted an open spiral. Why open? Someone asked. Because memory does not close. It transforms. The shelter shone. Not because of the lights. Because of the presences. Luz took the notebook. Wrote. This shelter is no longer ours. It belongs to all those who need to remember in order to continue. Thomas added. And of those who do not yet know that they need to do it. Dona Clara smiled. Then he retired. Not as a farewell. As a transition. The inspector left his notebook. Empty. But with a feather on top. Thank you, he said. Thank you for coming without papers, Luz replied. The collective mural was completed. Not with a signature. With a spiral that came out of the shelter and extended into the forest.
Chapter 9. The Rift That Binds Us Together.
The shelter continued to receive visitors. But they no longer came out of curiosity. They came out of necessity. By intuition. Through cracks that they did not know how to name. Luz and Tomas had created a new notebook. They called it the Book of Those Who Still Breathe. It was not a record. It was a map. Each page contained a story, an absence, a transformation. What if someone doesn't want to write? Tomas asked. Then let him draw. Let him sing. Let him leave a stone. Every gesture is memory, Luz replied. Dona Clara no longer lived in the shelter. But he appeared at key moments. As if the wind were calling her. You don't need a guide anymore. Now they are guides. Luz began to travel. He visited schools, hospitals, prisons. He wore white feathers, spirals, fragments. He was not talking about Alma. He spoke of what Alma had opened. Tomas stayed in the shelter. But his murals traveled. They were printed on postcards, in books, on other people's walls. Each stroke was a shared crack. One day, a little girl arrived with a box. Inside, there were drawings of his mother. He never met her. But he dreamed of it. Can I leave this? Of course. Here everything you dream has the right to exist. The inspector returned. This time as a volunteer. He helped to classify the offerings. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes he laughed. He never explained why. What if the shelter gets too big? Then let it multiply. Luz and Tomas created replicas. Not as franchises. Like echoes. Each space had its own crack. Its own altar. Their own archive. In Oaxaca, a wind shelter for migrants. In Chiapas, one for searching mothers. In Monterrey, one for workers who lost their voice. In Ecatepec, one for young people who do not want to forget. Each had an open spiral. And a white feather. One night, Luz dreamed of Alma. He was in a field of flowers. He didn't cry. He did not speak. She only wove spirals with invisible threads. What are you doing? I'm embroidering the cracks, not to close them, so that they are not forgotten. Tomas painted that dream. She called it the seamstress of the wind. It became a symbol, not mourning, of continuity. The archive of the original shelter was filled. There was no more space. Then Luz proposed something new. Let each visitor take a share. May the archive travel with them. This is how La Grita Portable was born. A small box with a pen, a candle, a notebook, and a stone. Each person used it as a mobile altar, as an intimate ritual, as an act of resistance. Dona Clara appeared one last time. It had a spiral of mud. This is for you. Not as a closing. Like a seed. Luz and Tomas placed her in the center of the shelter. Not as an ornament. Like heart. The wind blew. The birds sang. Michi purred. Toto barked toward the horizon. The final mural appeared on its own. No one painted it. It was a spiral that came out of the shelter and was lost in the sky. Luz wrote in the notebook. There is no end. Just new ways of remembering. Thomas added. And to accompany. The crack was still open. But it didn't hurt anymore. It was a bridge. It was root. It was wind.
Epilogue. For those who decide to remember. If you're reading this, you've already crossed the threshold. Maybe you came out of curiosity. Perhaps by intuition. Maybe because something inside you also needed a shelter. Not one of walls, but of symbols. Of cracks that do not close. Of presences that are not explained. There are no instructions here. Just gestures. You can leave a feather. Or a word. Or a silence. You can light a candle. Or write a name you never said out loud. You can draw a spiral. It doesn't matter if it's broken. Here every stroke is valid. Because this refuge lives in you now. Not as a souvenir. As a possibility. Luz and Tomas continue walking. Sometimes together. Sometimes in dreams. Sometimes in the stories that others tell without knowing that they are being told. Alma appears on the edges. In the sighs. In the invisible threads that connect what was with what can still be. And you. You are part of this spiral. There is no end. Just new ways of remembering. The Infinite Library, a place of entertainment and infinite knowledge.